you may get told no 30, 40 times a day. And from an emotional standpoint, that's not for everybody.
This is Nigel Hammett. He's a former student athlete and engineering major who decided to pursue a career in tech sales, but found a creative solution to land offers to work at Meta and Google right out of college with starting earnings north of $130,000, even without formal internships or experience. If you're a student looking for a career that doesn't require any specific degree but has an uncapped earnings potential, this is an episode you need to watch. Here's his career playbook.
The most simple terms is essentially selling the software, the product, to either another business or a customer. So when you think about your favorite store, your favorite app, whether it be Netflix or whatever you like to utilize, somebody has to buy it, especially at the highest enterprise level. And there usually is a human involved, aka me, to go ahead and help out with that process.
Just to help the viewers at home understand, contextualize a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey to get to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, I appreciate you having me. For the audience that's listening today, I'm Nigel Hammett, currently in my 20s working in tech sales. My journey getting here at a very high level. Went to college. I was a student athlete. So coming out of high school, I was pretty good at tennis. So I went to North Carolina A&T, where I walked on as a tennis player. Was also an engineering student. And then, of course, changed things up by the time of graduation. And I learned where I could combine my speaking, personality, and business skills that I had outside of class, but then utilize my tech skills that I learned through class into what we call now today tech sales. There isn't a major for being an account executive. There isn't a major for tech sales, but it's an industry that I discovered. And so I worked at both Meta and Google right out of college. Was really fortunate enough to do that. And now currently today in the startup space, focusing on AI search.
Gotcha. And with that, obviously, you've probably worked on a number of different deals. We'd love to get some visuals on what your typical project might look like. What does a day-to-day look like? If you could take us from like the beginning of when you're given like a lead to go after all the way to when you close a deal, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Tech sales is absolutely fascinating. You throw out a few terms, leads, deals. There's a lot of different aspects to it. But for me, when I graduated college, my first position was an account manager at Meta. And I actually had a book of business or a territory where they say, hey, Nigel, you're in charge of Florida. You're in charge of these types of businesses. Anyone that fits that role is free game. And so I started off in SMB, small, medium businesses. And essentially, this would be as little as maybe $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year, all the way up to into the six figures in terms of revenue that they could be spending on the platform every single year.
Awesome. That's super helpful to hear, like, I guess, some of your early experiences. I know you did mention that you were an engineering student at some point. I guess, what inspired you to transition into tech sales in the first place?
Man, I love engineering. I graduated with an industrial systems engineering degree. For all my engineers on the call or tech folks, you know the struggle of whether it's programming languages, the difficult math courses that we had to take. But for me, I did the internships in engineering. I did the internships in manufacturing. And actually, when I went to the Bay Area for one of my manufacturing internships, I was exposed to the bigger tech theme. And I knew that there had to be more. I got back to college. I only had one semester left. I graduated in December, and I immediately put my shift into big tech, specifically into business or tech sales.
Yeah. And obviously looking at your experience so far, you've worked at some of the biggest companies, you've seen the startup side as well. Like, were you always successful as an AE and a salesperson, or were you doing stuff behind the scene to, master your craft, or what were you doing to kind of set yourself apart and continue to, improve day in, day out?
Yeah, for sure. Especially thinking in my beginning days, one of the hardest things to do in any job field is get that first initial big job because it's a hamster wheel where they want you to have experience. You don't have the experience and you can't get the job unless you have the experience. And so one way that strategy that I utilize is actually creating my own experience. When I went to Meta, I never took a marketing class. I was an engineering student. So instead, with my own business, with my side projects, my friends' businesses, I would run ads for them. I would utilize the product that Meta had, and I actually created my own experience, my own portfolio. And by the time I was fortunate enough to get the interview, I was already prepared with real experience, even outside of an internship or even outside of a classroom.
And is that something you would recommend students to try and replicate, go out and find something they're passionate about, try to build a project or business out of it and stack up your experience outside of just work and coursework that way?
Yeah, especially in this competitive space. I mean, everybody's in class, everybody is getting an A or a B, everyone has good internships, but not everybody has real world experience. And you don't necessarily need to go create a six-figure business or raise seed funding or capital funding. But even if you're helping a neighbor, a local mom and pop shop build a website, or if you're in business, help them close a couple of deals. If you're in graphic design, make them a flyer or two and be able to speak to the actual real world applications, and that's going to set you apart, in my opinion, in the application and interview process.
Gotcha. And jumping more over to moments of your job that felt rewarding, like, do you have any examples where you just felt really happy or proud of what you were working on or the experience that you got at maybe one of these companies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in sales, it's all about selling. So anytime you start a new job, it's like you make your first sale, it feels good. It's almost like you go to college and you get your first A, or anything in life, your first is always a beautiful thing. And so with sales, you want to be confident, you want to have the business acumen. And then when you have someone that believes in you, right, that understands what you're selling, there's a fit, the value is there on both sides, and they're able to sign that deal or put their card on file, there's no better feeling. I remember my first sale at Meta, I remember my first sale at Google, and even these startups, I have the same feeling when I get that first sale.
I know all jobs have their bright sides, but no job is perfect. We know that.
Yeah.
So if a student said, I want to go into tech sales, this is my dream career, what would you warn them about?
That's a good question because tech sales is being promoted right now on social media. But there's a few downsides. I would say number one, not everyone can handle the layer of rejection that you often could face early on in your career. We understand that there's different roles as the account manager, there's the account executive, and then there's their BDR, SDR, sales development rep, business development rep. In these positions, you may get told no 30, 40 times a day. And from an emotional standpoint, that's not for everybody. Of course, with sales, it's like that always on type of feel where you're constantly chasing the next dollar. It's very always on, where if somebody hits you up Friday afternoon ready to sign. I mean, we do get a sales commission and bonus. It's very lucrative, but sometimes you may prefer a job where, hey, once I close my laptop, I'm done. So I would say those are probably two early components that I always tell folks about.
And how do you normally, I guess, like deal with that? Like for someone that is still interested, but maybe doesn't deal with the rejection that well, is there anything that you've done in your career that you found successful to like almost combat against that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like I have to also work at a company that has a good brand. I can't go sell, Joe's Garage Crab Shack like that. It won't work because I know I'm going to get told no 90 times a day. Even me, I can't handle that. That's not for me. And so I intentionally put my mind on, getting into these bigger fan companies, and even the startups that I work at today, they're very reputable. They have a strong brand. And it's not that I don't get told no, but there's a level of respect there that's established, right? Even Google gets told no, but it's a level of rapport and build that's already there. So that's number one. And then number two is just kind of like finding that sweet spot. I have like my pump up song. I may listen to music. I may work out in the morning. And that's any job where you want to have a good routine, but it's all about kind of understanding how you are emotionally and putting yourself in the best spot to win.
There's a guy
And
going viral right now. I don't know if you've seen him, the Wolf of Insurance. He
Oh, yeah.
takes a bunch of sales calls shirtless and he flexes and listens to his pop-up call. It's
There's
amazing.
a few guys like that. That's why I said it's promoted. You see a lot of folks on social media, but
Yeah,
it is an awesome career for sure.
yeah.
And you briefly mentioned earlier account executive, SDRs, BDRs. For people
Mhm.
that might be familiar with sales as a whole, like, can you break down all the different avenues within sales and how an AE would differ from some of these other roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the very top would be that AE, account executive, and essentially they're going to be closing the biggest, the longest deals, especially at the enterprise level. Now, when you're thinking about your account managers, they are managing accounts. So a lot of companies have post-sales operations where maybe the business has already been established, the sales already been made. You want to check in, make sure that they continue to spend. And then we talked about that BDR, SDR, sales development rep, business development rep. In short, they're on the phones getting folks interested, setting meetings, setting appointments. That's a very early tenure type of position. But for me, I actually came right out of college at that AM spot. I luckily didn't have to do the BDR, SDR, and I think it's a great starter position. But that's just the biggest difference is whether you're managing, closing deals, reaching out to both warm and cold leads.
And between, like, obviously it sounds like you can start your career off as an SDR or BDR or jump straight into what you did as at the AM level or even as an AE. Like, are there like pros and cons to each? Like, I guess, how did you think about that and wanting to go straight into that account manager level?
Let's talk about that. The pros of BDR, SDR, in my opinion, is actually easier to hit the sales target because you're judged on how many meetings you can book and how many contacts or how many calls that you're making. Especially if it's a good service or a really strong brand, people are going to be interested. If you're even average at sales or average at just having that conviction, you can get folks on the phone. The AE spot pays more, but it takes a bit of science and art to actually close a deal, especially we're talking 15, 20K, six-figure plus to physically get someone to write the check or put their card information down. In my opinion, it's longer. It takes more time. And so the pros in the AE, you have the tenure, you're kind of like running your own operation, but to have the level of success and to stay in the industry at a high level is a thin line. At the BDR, SDR level, you may actually work harder, right? Where each hour you may be making more calls, but you may actually make more money up front in sales commissions depending on the company that you're at.
And you touched a little bit on if you're good at sales. Like, can you tell me about, like, number one, what does that mean? And two, how do you actually get good at sales?
One is also like the seasonality and when you're selling and what you're selling, right? There's a lot of folks that, I worked at Google, I worked at Meta. I mean, anybody could sell Google or Meta, but it's hard to get into these places, and they know that. And so, to that point, right, it's the ability to articulate, your ability to negotiate, look at a contract, your ability to create examples, establish a good rapport. And this is what we call the art and the science of sales. We ask all the time, are sales folks made or are they, created and developed over time? And it's a combination of both. Professional athlete definitely has a lot of natural ability, but at the NBA or the NFL or baseball, football, everybody's good. There's a few small factors that separate the greats from all the rest of the professionals. So that's what I think about.
Gotcha. And then talking about how commissions and compensation works in sales, you kind of touched on commissions, but can you talk to us about how in tech sales, maybe how that is typically set up, what you can be expecting coming out of college, and how you might expect that to grow over the course of your career?
And on this podcast, can we share numbers? Like I know,
Would love
like
numbers.
okay, because I hate when
Yeah.
people tell me about careers and they don't tell me how much do these people get paid. So at the BDR, SDR slot, coming out of college, a very early career. At the low side, you can see some positions, 50, 60K, the low side. That's just being realistic. At the high side, I've seen a lot of positions, 75, 80. I would say at that 90 range. This is just base for that SDR, BDR position. Now, most jobs will match that. They'll do 50-50. So if you're getting 70K on the base as an SDR, the average company will also offer you 70K in sales commission. That can be broken down either quarterly or monthly, and they will arrange a target. Hey, if you get 30 meetings a month, you'll get 100% of your goal. If you get 40 meetings a month, you'll get 110. And that's how it's usually broken down at the BDR, SDR slot. Now, at the AE slot, obviously those numbers kick up where the low side of the base would probably be like that 70, 80. And at the high side, it can get pretty steep depending on the experience. I've seen roles go all the way up to 140, 150, but on average, it probably will be around that 80, 90 level if you're a few years in. Now it's going to be the same exact thing. If it's 80K base, you also get 80K in sales commission, but instead of meeting books, they're actually going to judge that 80K based off of how many deals you close and the actual revenue, the ARR, the targets from a monetary perspective that you actually can hit.
Gotcha. And what would you say is like the secret sauce for some of these top performing AEs at these companies? Are there any stories of people that have just completely smashed their quotas and targets for the year, and any fun stories there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some guys, even at Google, top of the top, that were able to just completely knock out their goals. And I've had some great quarters, but I've seen some folks double, even triple the targets. I've even had a situation where I've seen an individual hit his year-long goal in the first quarter. So it depends on what you're selling, how big the package is, etc. But usually it's about timing, right? So when you're looking to break into a sales organization, there's pros and cons. Going into an organization that's been here for a long time, you'll probably get a lot of structure and training, but it may be actually harder to hit the target because there's going to be other reps competing for the same revenue, and they're going to move the needle a bit higher as other folks have done it before. Now, if you go to the startup space where I'm at now, strong industry, maybe first, second, third year, there's a good possibility, even with the average sales ability, that someone could come in and completely knock out their goals. Now you ask some other tips, different things that I've seen. I mean, these sales folks that are hitting their goals, they're organized. They have a system, they have sales methodologies, they have their CRM on tap, their hygiene pipeline is there, their forecasting ability is there, and they do a great job of not talking to people who aren't interested and putting 90% of their energy and attention at interested folks, qualified folks, and people that have the money. They don't spend time wasting time.
hmm Yeah, I feel like sales kind of embodies this quote of like, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your processes. Like, is that accurate?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and on the point of just structure and stability, like in your opinion, how stable of a career path is it to be working in sales? I think a lot of students looking at these different jobs, there has been a lot of volatility in the workforce and the economy. So we'd love to hear your take on that.
And that what I would say is could be the downside of sales. It is not the most stable, right? Where you're only as good as your current quarter, where you could have had a great year, close all the deals, and then next year things are a bit slow. At the end of the day, it's our job to deliver, execute, and make the company money. And so no, I mean, there are other professions that are more stable. It's a great opportunity to break in, especially if you have the business and sales skills. And if you want to develop a shift into being a program manager or to going more into data science analytics, it just depends. Right now, no one's job is safe. So it's hard to say.
Fair enough. I am curious though, like there's a lot of students out there that they have so many decisions to make, right? And a lot of them are just like, tell me exactly what I need to do. So if we had to
I got you.
simplify this for them, like what would you say is the playbook to getting into tech sales?
Here's the playbook, and this could be applied at the high school level or the college level. Number one, YouTube University, pick a lane, right? You have to know where you're going. I can't give somebody GPS directions if I don't know the address. So pick an industry. For me, it was tech sales. This could be applied anywhere across the board. Once you decide, hey, tech sales is the direction, this is the GPS, this is the map, there's a few things that you want to start doing. If you have the opportunity to get an internship, obviously go ahead and take advantage of that. Any type of business internship, even product engineering, there's aspects and elements of sales that you can incorporate, but you want to look and target those associate programs or companies that really have a large sales organization. Most companies actually hire a lot of interns at the sales spot, and it's harder to get the full-time position. Now, if you don't get the internship, that's fine. You could go my route. My route is gain the experience on your own. So I chose to go big tech. So let me go ahead and get my Google certification. Let me go ahead and play around with meta ads, run a couple of ads for $2. And so if you're looking at AI, let me get on Chat GBT. Let me explore some prompts. Let me look at some dashboards. If you're looking at med tech, hey, let me talk to the family doctor that I know and ask them some questions and see if I could do a 5-minute interview and do a mini project. Whatever you have to do, get that experiment experience. What most people don't do is they don't document it, they don't have a portfolio, and they don't know how to package it up. Without that, you're not going to get the interviews. And if you do get the interviews, you're probably going to lose to someone that has already done that type of homework and groundwork. And so once you have that internship or once you have those many experiences, and again, no one needs to know whether you got paid or not. Nobody needs to know that it was a 5 or 10 minute conversation that you were able to expand and continue to learn and develop. That's irrelevant. You paint the picture however big you need to, and then you go ahead and you target your industry. You put your vision board, maybe your favorite top 10, top 15 companies. You mass supply with intention. You try to get referrals. You have that outreach strategy. You're getting those coffee chats. And then if you're doing all those things at a consistent level, it'd be very hard not to get some serious interviews on the board.
On the point with building your portfolio, like you said, what are some of the most important parts of it? Is it to showcase that you can learn a new technology or a new product really quickly? Or can you break that down for us a bit more?
Yeah, I would say your learning speed, and then also it shows that you have the credibility. I'm not just what these companies don't want right now, and it's hard for our young folks. They don't want projects, and it's crazy. They don't even want new people. So you always have to bridge the gap. Even though you're new, you're young, you still have to come off as experienced to some sort of degree. And that's what a portfolio, even the attempt of creating a portfolio will do for you. It'll give you that experience. It'll give you that confidence.
Got it. And I know you mentioned like a lot of great tips on like how to break into tech sales as a whole, but let's say you have a really ambitious kid who said, my dream company is Meta or Google. And given that you worked at both, like,
Yeah.
is there any specific tips that really help people rise to that level?
Yeah, I mean, one, of course, these are very competitive companies. They're going to tell you to use, right? Have a good resume, tailor your LinkedIn, and that's absolutely correct. But my biggest thing is relationships network. So when I broke into Meta, it took me 6 months with one individual. He would come to my school looking for engineers. But every day, every time he would come to my school, I would help him, take out the boxes, the donuts and the pizzas, and bring it into the lobby, right? I would establish that level of like, hey, I'm really serious about Meta. Although you're not looking for tech sales folks, you're my only path. So whatever path that you have, utilize that. People actually respect consistency. They do respect youth, right? If you're a student, you have an advantage because people don't expect you to have all the experience. But when you show that initiative, you build that rapport. We need that referral. We need that inside advantage. Otherwise, it's just a number or a name and a needle in the haystack.
And I guess one more question that we want to kind of finish off with is, for a student that might be looking at all these different career paths, not just sales, but isn't sure about how to validate their passions or intent, like, do you have any advice for them to be able to narrow that down and like you said earlier, pick that lane and kind of run at it full speed?
Yeah, and this is a good question because this takes a lot of self-awareness to get to this point. You want to start thinking about what comes easier to me and harder to other people. For me, that was public speaking, explaining things, the things that I have to do every single day in sales. Number two, what can I do from a class perspective, project, work, business that doesn't feel like work? I forget the comedian who made the joke. When you have a job, they say time moves slow. When you have a career or a passion, the day goes by just like that. And so when you're thinking about the things that you've done in your life, when does the time go really fast? And then start and even ask your friends, folks that have already in the space. You may have mentors, you may have family members that are in certain career. Hey, based off what you've seen from me, what do you think about this career? And of course, you have to make that decision yourself, but start to have those really inner type of evaluation, high level of self awareness type of conversations. Weed things out what you don't want to do. I knew I didn't want to do certain things, but I tried it first and was able to cross those things out.
Gotcha. That makes a ton of sense. Well, Nigel, this was an awesome episode. I feel like I learned a ton about what it's like to be, a salesperson and a high performer AE. For those watching, like, generally speaking, where can people find you?
Of course. So I'm Nigel Hammett again. You can find me and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube at Nigel's Canvas as well as Instagram. And then I have a career group, the Resume Plug, where we help break folks into tech. And we are all on the same mission here, just trying to help as many people as we can.
I love that. Well, to everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks.